collaborative show between Weirding Way Media and Someone's Favorite Productions. I'm your co-host from Someone's Favorite, Ryan Verrill.
And I'm your other host from Weirding Way Media and the Culture Cast, Chris Stashew.
On this show, we ask and answer 4 questions about a given topic that is surrounding an actor, director, franchise, or microgenre. Tonight, one that's very near and dear to all of our hearts, I'm sure, an actor, and as you've seen in the title, we are going to be discussing Robin Williams. And as usual, our job is to entice you to broaden your horizons on film, encourage you to travel down film tangents and side roads that you may never have traveled down otherwise. And again, this one's going to be interesting because most people have probably seen at least one film from Robin Williams, but I have a very, very strong inkling that we're going to have some interesting discussion tonight. And the main reason why is because we have a very close friend of mine as our guest tonight. And our guest, one of the 2 co-hosts of Chasing Labels. It is an incredible podcast that focuses on physical media just like mine, has some interviews that they discuss with a lot of people in the world, and even gets incredibly huge names like the director of Renfield, my friend, Mr. Stephen Billings. Thanks for doing this, sir.
Oh, no problem, man. It's good to be here, Ryan. Chris, nice meeting you for the first time here. We all love physical media. We love film, and taking kind of a little bit of a break from just physical media talk. It's good to just have a nice discussion about one particular topic, subject matter. So, and Robin Williams is something that's, he's near and dear to my heart, not just, as an actor, but just his presence in film. Like, I just always really appreciated what he brought. So, I can't wait to discuss him tonight.
Well, as we are, wading into the beginning parts of this, first off, why don't you tell everybody what Chasing Labels is? I'd love to hear your elevator pitch. I don't think I've ever heard this from you.
Oh, God. Well, Chasing Labels, is a podcast that me and my friend Andrew Cabral co-host together, and we used to do a weekly show, but then things kind of got tough doing that weekly, so we do it bi-weekly now. And so we run down the last couple weeks of releases. We usually focus on things that interest us as collectors. We used to run through as much as possible, but we've kind of weaned it down to more like, picking our favorites, picking the things we feel like we would add to our collection. And Andrew, as I call the robot, he will watch as much as possible and help give you an inside on the films that we are talking about, and help maybe make you decide whether you want to buy it or not. And but on Chasing Labels, we do other things. We have a show called The Unwatched Pile, where we pick a film out of our collection that we haven't watched, talk about it, and then pair it with something in our collection we have watched. And then we got other things. We got Movies Down Memory Lane as a new thing we started. We got some other things in the works. But interviews with a lot of insiders. Yeah, we do a lot of we spend a lot of time on this, Ryan.
I know the feeling all too well. And in the meantime, you got to try to watch stuff that involves some of our favorites, like Robin Williams. So,
yes.
Why Robin Williams? When we discussed this seemed like a pretty immediate jump out topic for you.
Yeah. So, you told me when you told me about this show, and it's called Film Foundation. So I started to think about what was somebody, because the different type of categories you asked me about, you said like a genre, a franchise, something like that. And I said, well, as my foundations obviously started when I was young. And so for, I think a lot of us, you kind of grab onto actors, actors. For me, it was where when I'm watching movies, when I'm a kid, I'm not thinking about the director yet. I'm not thinking about who's behind making this yet. I'm thinking about who's on the screen. And
right.
The actor that always was on the screen when I was a kid, that always made me laugh, made me cry, and continued to up to, of course, unfortunately passed some years back, but for a long time throughout my life would always entertain me in so many different ways. And that was Robin Williams. And I was like, he's really my favorite actor. I mean, he's really my favorite actor of all time. And I feel like that would be a foundational person for me to talk about. So that's why I choose him. He's just always been a really important figure in my movie watching life. So,
what about you, Chris? How do you feel about Robin Williams?
I'm right there with you. Steven, I think that obviously, just going to assume we're close in age, and that would mean that,
65. I'm 65.
Yeah, 71 here. You were so like
I knew it. I knew it.
Close in age. Like you've kind of already alluded to, the idea of watching something when you're a kid and it makes an impact on you. I mean, look, there's one thing that Robin Williams did. I think one specific thing that he did when we were of a right age that is still, best I can tell, like a high watermark for Disney as a company, along with Robin Williams as an actor in terms of creating a character in Aladdin that, like, I don't know, makes an indelible mark to the point where when people are like, and they're doing Aladdin live action, and who is playing the genie? Oh, right. It would have been better if we had just not done this, right? Okay, good. Everybody agreed, but we did it anyways. Like, that is part and parcel because of who Robin Williams is as an actor, creating that character that, I mean, again, yes, Aladdin is a movie about Aladdin, but it's really a movie about the fucking genie. And that, for me, I think is what Robin Williams is. Like, anything he is in, he stands out in a way that is hard to ignore him as an actor. And like you've kind of already alluded to, if you're that kind of actor, you will become someone's favorite actor too, because you are someone that they are going out of their way to see because they're giving you a reason to. And I feel like Robin Williams, multi-talented, multifaceted actor in a lot of ways, but yeah, no, I'm right there with you. The kind of my entry points to Robin Williams may be a little different than yours, but I think we're kind of simpatico. I'm with you. Like, Robin Williams was a big part of my formative years, especially Robin Williams' stand-up comedy. Yeah, this stand-up comedy is, I mean, most people don't think of him as a stand-up comedian, but like that's a big part of this for me is his stand-up comedy stuff. So I'll say, what about you, Ryan?
Well, I mean, the stand-up comedy thing is his most consistent thing. He started doing that, and it's the only thing that he literally did his entire career. Right. Obviously, Mork and Mindy was a big breakout for him, but he didn't do a ton of stuff for a handful of years after that. And then the early 80s, he got a couple like fairly big roles, but he didn't hit hard as not even like a movie star, but as like a movie personality until the late 80s. And throughout that entire time, he is touring. He's, on and off substances and getting himself right and healthy. And then the 90s came and he just exploded as not just a movie character, but as a full-blown star that will put butts in seats. And, showing different flexes of his ability to encapsulate roles that people had sort of seen early on, but really forgotten. Like, it was a long time since Moscow on the Hudson before he started doing, some of the more serious things in the mid to late 90s. And then, the 2000s, dark times for him and his multiple wives, dark times for him and going to rehab, and dark times for some of those film choices. And unfortunately, it's because, he's like the main person that we've heard throughout years is that when you have a comedian, a lot of times there's a lot of sadness behind those eyes. And I have loved Robin Williams probably since I was like 4 or 5 years old without knowing it. I think Aladdin was the first thing I ever saw, but if it wasn't, it had to have been Hook. Like, I know personally that Hook is really not a great movie. Steven Spielberg just kind of threw everything possible. The plot makes zero sense when you take even like a half a step back and look at the movie. However, he is everything about that movie. He is like that naive, very innocent, very irritable person in the beginning of that movie turning into somebody getting more and more childish, which is the epitome of the Peter Pan story. And the way that he makes you smile as that movie goes on and on. Yeah, the movie sucks, but I still fucking love it. That movie's incredible. And I watched that so much growing up, and to see from there to go to things like discovering Moscow on the Hudson 20 years after it was made and being like, whoa, this is the Robin Williams that we had in 1982. And I fell in love with the Robin Williams of the early 90s that is so different. And, a lot of other people, they only remember your Mrs. Doubtfires and your Flubbers. And it's like, Jesus, this guy is so much more than that. And he always was. But yeah, he's just a gift to cinema. I feel like this is one that I think that the three of us could probably just gush about for the next hour and a half and call it good. But obviously we try to get a little more detail on that. history on Robin Williams. Anything that you want to share for you, Stephen, that was formative, or any compelling stories from his history you want to share with everybody? Make sure they know.
I mean, very much like you. I would say probably Aladdin was the the first thing that did influence me. Introduced me. And it's funny because they make the genie look very much like Robin Williams, but you don't know the real face yet. And as a kid, there's definitely video footage of me with the shell case VHS running around the living room. Watching this on repeat, and And so his voice and his charisma and all that stuff was definitely in my ears and in my eyes very early on. And from there, all the 90s stuff really, just everything he did, Jumanji, Jack, all that stuff, what he does, like you kind of described with Hook, that innocence, that ability to have a sincereness and almost childlike way about him worked for him time and time again. And then, of course, he went to dark places as well. And that's the stuff that came later for me, the stuff that I would discover later and go back and be like, damn, like this dude did everything. Like this guy, and honestly, some of our best actors have a comedic background. Like and he's just one of the best. He kind of set the standard for a lot of comedic actors, I think, that are doing it now, that are trying to delve into that, go from comedy to more dramatic roles. I think he really set a new standard during that time. So, once again, it's just, I know there's questions to go along with it. I don't want to stomp over the same ground. So, but yeah.
Well, then let's jump into the ground then and make sure that we are solving everything in the proper order. Why don't we start? Question number one, of course, what do you think, Stephen, is the foundational title for somebody that miraculously in their life has somehow never seen a Robin Williams film? What is the best one for somebody new to him to watch first?
Well, this is tough. This was really tough for me because, when I'm thinking about what was the first thing that I'm either going with my heart or going with what I really think would be it was tough. So my first inclination was Mrs. Doubtfire, because I feel like Mrs. Doubtfire shows Robin Williams at the height of his powers and doing, it's a family film, but it's also something that deals with a really, of course, serious subject matter of a family being torn apart, things like that. And he's able to play multiple characters in this one movie, even do some voice acting in the beginning of this movie. But then when I really started to think about it, I said, well, I think it's important to see closer to what would be the beginnings of what he became later on is a little bit more important. And I think if I had to choose a first film for somebody to be introduced, it would probably be Good Morning Vietnam. I think Good Morning Vietnam, shows multiple sides of Robin Williams. He's in, the war, and, there's serious things going on around him. He has to be sensitive. There's scenes where he has to be sensitive to what's going on, but then he's also looking at himself as this, this light for people that are going through hell. He is on the radio. He is trying to liven the people's spirits. He's in this war zone, and this is where you get to see that stand up. That he's so, as you said, known for, and he did through his whole career. A lot of that stand up and that improv and that on the fly comedy is all up in this. I mean, it's all up in this, and this really just shows off his talent as a comedian. And I think that's where you have to start with where Robin Williams is show the range. The range is all over this movie, and this is where I would tell people to start.
The big thing with this one, too, is it shows that he can carry a film. It was the first one that was like, this movie is all Robin all the time. And funny enough, as I was thinking which one to choose, this and one other were competing for me, and I went with the other one. But this, I mean, it's it's so foundational for him. Like the fact that he was nominated for the Best Actor Oscar for this is still mind blowing. It was so early in his career and not somebody that you would typically trust with a giant role like this.
Yeah.
I could see any other lifetime where when this came out, this could have easily gone to Tom Hanks.
Yeah.
With the run that he was going on comedy wise, this would have been an easy casting. But man, I'm so glad that he made this movie. This movie is damn near perfect. It holds up really well. It is such an interesting story. And honestly, the fact that it came out so soon after the Vietnam War and everybody's still feeling the effects of that is really compelling timing. But Chris, how do you feel about Good Morning Vietnam? And then what's your pick for the foundational title?
I've never seen Good Morning Vietnam.
Whoa.
Yeah.
It's okay, man. Hey, now it's time. It's time now. It's time.
Of course it's okay. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just a movie. But, I mean, to your point, I obviously can acknowledge the fact that it's an important movie, like you mentioned, nominated for Best Actor. So what's funny is this is not a movie that I had even really seen until last year. And again, I'm only picking this because, again, in the way that I look at it, I think that you would be doing someone a disservice if you didn't tell them to watch Mrs. Doubtfire. It's a movie I did not see until literally November of last year, or December. Again, I love Robin Williams, but the things that I love him for is not Mrs. Doubtfire. That's my second answer, is the thing that's like my Robin Williams thing. It's probably not going to be either of y'all's answers. But that's the thing. With someone like Robin Williams, it was actually harder for me to pick the next question than it was this one, because like you've already alluded to, Stephen, like the idea of what is needed from Robin Williams is exactly what he gives in that movie, which is a performance that, again, having never seen it, I didn't realize how sad the movie was going to be. And it's like also how, and again, like there's something about him, Robin Williams, like he plays a sad sack so perfectly that it's hard not to cry. Like I cried more watching Mrs. Doubtfire than I have in most movies, because for me, music is what resonates with me emotionally more than film does. Even though I love film, I don't get teary-eyed at movies. And you put on a certain song and like that, I'll start crying. But Mrs. Doubtfire got me pretty good. Because again, like I think there's something about Robin Williams where he's, like you mentioned, he's funny, but he can also be very kind of open about his feelings, but he's also like a man-child, but he's also conflicted about being a man-child, and then he literally plays another character as well. So for me, it's Mrs. Doubtfire. Is it kind of a cop-out? Maybe. Is it maybe the obvious choice? Maybe. But I think it's the right choice. And also, I'd like to point out, I am probably, if not secretly, I'll say it openly because I'm not ashamed of it, huge fan of Chris Columbus as a filmmaker.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he's a good filmmaker.
Yeah, we did, when we did our Harry Potter episode of Film Foundations, I think I waxed poetically a little bit about Chris Columbus and his ability to actually get good performances out of child actors, which is, don't work with animals and don't work with kids. And Chris Columbus has proved at least half of that wrong, I feel like. And Mrs. Doubtfire, I think, is a good example of that as well, because it's also the kid actors in that movie are great. I mean, you have one of the Lawrence brothers, you have her name escapes me, but the little girl that plays
Madeline?
Yeah.
Matilda. That's Madeline.
Yeah, she plays,
Matilda.
Mara Wilson. And then, and also has Pierce Brosnan in kind of a fun role, and Sally Field, but you're there for Robin Williams. And so, yeah, he runs away with that movie from scene one. I enjoyed that movie a lot, and like I said, for me, it was not a movie I was expecting to cry during, but I definitely cried during it.
That, and for about a year after that movie, all you could hear from people resonating across the country is, hello!
Yeah. Yeah, that's like the Borat of its time.
Yeah, I mean, Mrs. Doubtfire is, I mean, it was tough. That was like my pick my B pick of one.
Right.
Like it was tough because I agree with you. It's got everything. I mean, it's like really in the middle of his career when he's at like his top A level of stardom, and it's so quotable. It's so just little things, just little scenes, like the scene where he's in the studio by himself and he's thinking about how to make that dinosaur show better. And he's like, comes up there and he's just improvising. I'm a raptor. doing what I can't, he's like doing all his things. And I'm just like, this is just these little things are things that I remember about the movie more than any of the big moments people remember. Like that's the stuff that I would mimic as a kid, by myself in a mirror, cause I'm weird, doing stuff like that, that and other actors that I was enjoying at the time, it's such an amazing movie. Little quips here and there that I remember, I love it. I love Mrs. Doubtfire.
And can you imagine we live in a universe where it was almost Tim Allen and he turned the role down? That movie would have been awful. Just a nightmare. Because, I don't mind Tim Allen, his politics aside, apparently, but I've never really seen Tim Allen have an emotional side to him. And that's even in the Santa Claus, which is like effectively his Mrs. Doubtfire, right? Like I look at Santa Claus and I'm like, that's the movie that Tim Allen made instead of making Mrs. Doubtfire, because it's got that same weird energy to it.
Yeah, they both can play the everyman in a way.
The divorced dad.
Yeah, they can both play the everyman in a way, but the thing that Robin Williams can do vastly better than him is, like you said, show emotion, show transparency, show range. Tim Allen's really kind of got a shtick. He's kind of got, this like kind of man's man relatable kind of way about him that I think a lot of people like. I like Tim Allen. I like the films of that time, like the Santa Claus growing up. I love that. But he just doesn't have that versatility that Robin Williams can bring to a role, where he feels relatable. He feels sincere. He feels like you're staring into his soul through his eyes. Like he's got this way of his eye. A lot of times when I said this, and I know this is a little bit of an aside, but like Zac Efron, when Zac Efron tried to come from being a High School Musical to a film actor, I always had a problem with him because he never really, I didn't think he was good because I couldn't see it in his eyes. Like an actor can project, I think, when he's good, you can tell in his eyes that he means what he's doing. Like he's coming across. And he always seemed dead-eyed to me. But now I feel like he's growing as an actor. Like I just watched Iron Claw for the first time, and I was like, dude, he took it to a new level. Like he finally broke out.
Movie.
Oh, he's amazing in that movie. And I was like, he broke out. He finally did it to me. Like he finally convinced me that he's in this role when he's not, something. He's not Zac Efron anymore. So, but yeah, that's what Robin Williams does every time almost. Like he convinces me that he's totally invested. So,
well, and it's that sadness, I think, too, because Robin Williams talks about it. Matthew Lawrence, I think, shares the story about like going into Robin Williams' trailer and seeing him just like head in hands, like dejected. And like, I think Robin Williams' natural setting was probably a very depressed person.
I was going to say his real, who he is really, behind the cameras, I think it was a very sad person. So
that's why he plays sad so well.
It made it, he could go to that place,
Yeah. He knew it all too well, which is, again, like he's clearly struggled with mental health, which is something that I think a lot of us struggle with. So, yeah, it's hard. And again, like that's the hard thing, because like you mentioned, Robin Williams passed away, but Robin Williams took his own life because he was struggling. He lost his struggle with mental health, unfortunately. And like in Mrs. Doubtfire, like we've talked about, you can see that he's genuinely sad in those scenes in a way that most actors, like you've already alluded to, really can't go there. Even a Tom Hanks has a hard time getting there for me. Like, I've seen Forrest Gump a bunch of times, and I've never thought at any point was it a sad movie. Mrs. Doubtfire is a lot sadder of a movie because Robin Williams' ability to be genuine is just almost unparalleled, frankly.
Yeah. I agree.
So mine for this one, I was struggling between Good Morning Vietnam and this one, and I kind of said I owe it to myself to pick one that's a little more on the family side because I got to hit something because he hit so many of those. And the one that was always so important for me was 1995's Jumanji.
Hell yeah, it's a good one.
This movie, man, first of all, incredible cast. Like, Robin Williams obviously steals every scene that he's in, but young Kirsten Dunst, David Alan Grier is hilarious in this. Mm-hmm. Bonnie Hunt is great. Even, like, Bebe Neuwirth, Jonathan Hyde are great.
Jonathan Hyde is amazing.
Yeah, and then Patricia Clarkson, like a super small role. But the way this movie unravels and you just stare at the way they keep one-upping it, and it doesn't feel, it feels so ahead of its time. Something about it, it doesn't feel 1995. It feels like something that should have been about a decade later. And I mean, the story itself is great. The effects are done pretty damn well, but the chemistry between this entire cast is always what sold it for me. Like the scenes cutting from when they're playing the board game to when they're kids again and they're hugging still. Something about that is just like, I want to be sitting right next to them and console them. Like they just had their life flash before their eyes so much. But yeah, this movie is incredible. It gets his comedy on every single scene that he's in. It gets his emotion for what it needs to be. It's very similar to Mrs. Doubtfire in that for me. It gets, it feels like he brings out better in all of these cast members. And not that they're not good actors, but without him in this role, I think absolutely none of them would have given the performance that they did, and it would have not have felt as earnest as it did. So, yeah, Jumanji, I think, is a brilliant entry point for somebody that's never seen any of these, because you get a little bit of everything, and it's going to make you go off into 9 different angles after that and go, well, God, now I have to seek everything out.
Yeah. And also directed by, I think, a little bit of an underrated director, Joe Johnston. Done some really cool stuff, whether it's The Rocketeer or October Sky, and of course he did like the first Captain America film. Like he's a little bit of a journeyman, but he, like, when he does something, it's usually kind of a fun genre movie. So I really think he's a cool, underrated director.
Well, considering how much you've waxed poetic on everything else, dying to hear this one. So our second question, how about you share a lesser-known film in his filmography, one that would be maybe a little bit of a turnoff if somebody were to watch that one first?
Well, this was tough too, because I mean, like, as I've gotten older, I have tried to fill in them gaps. The stuff I didn't watch early on, the stuff that maybe is a little lesser known. Especially a lot of his most recent, before he passed, a lot of that later Robin Williams is kind of, place that I don't think a lot of people have watched a lot of that stuff. But I went back into the 90s because this was a movie I actually did watch kind of early in my life. I watched it, but at the time didn't really kind of connect at all. Like, I just knew that it was kind of an interesting film and was kind of a sad movie, and just I didn't know what to make of it then. But then as I've watched it over the years again and again, it just becomes more tough to watch because it is so sad, but it's also beautiful. I mean, it's just I think a kind of an underrated movie in his filmography, and that's What Dreams May Come.
I was going to say, there's a component of this that we're missing out on where we could be like, we could guess what you're going to say. Because I was between 3 things there, and that was one of them.
Okay,
for sure. That's a great pick, by the way.
Thank you. This was, it was one that I watched a lot very early on. And I think, in rewatching it recently, I'm astounded at how visually amazing this movie is. Like, for the 90s, it did win Best Visual Effects at the Oscars the year it came out. So, and it still holds up amazingly. A lot of visuals of, like, everything looking like a painting. He's like in this painting, and which is his afterlife. And essentially the movie's about, these soulmates, that meet each other and fall in love and have a beautiful family, and then tragedy hits them. And eventually, Robin Williams dies, goes into the afterlife. And from there, he's, discovering, he's getting to see what's still going on out in his life, connected to his wife. And I don't want to tell the whole story of the movie, but it's a very sad movie, very melancholic movie, but it's also got this hopefulness to it that once again, Robin Williams brings. He brings this sense of hope to this role that I think it is the beating heart. Like, if he wasn't in the movie, this movie could have been a lot sadder than it already was. Like, I think if he didn't have that bright-eyedness, like, if they'd had Keanu Reeves play in this movie instead of him, this movie would have fucking been so depressing. Because, I mean, at the time, Keanu Reeves could have easily, big star at the time, fell into this role, and it would have been just so sad. But he finds a way to make this sad story into kind of a hopefulness by the end of it. And And I just always kind of go back to this movie every once in a while, just if I'm feeling a dark movie, like that he did, that I'm like, damn, this is a movie. But what does everybody else think?
That's another movie that makes me cry every time I watch it, which is why I've only seen it once. Literally, my wife was like, I like this movie.
I like going back to movies that make you cry.
Yeah. It's not, there's no apprehension there. It's just, I have never gone back to it because, like, it's an amazing movie, though. Like, the visuals alone are fantastic. What about you, Verrill? What do you think?
I love this movie. But again, it's been a very long time since I've seen it. Like, maybe the early 2000s. This is one of those ones that's, for some reason, the magnet doesn't draw me back immediately. So honestly, this is a perfect pick for number 2 here. I think it's obviously a really well-made movie, and one that he is this movie, and that's true about so many of these. And it's fantastical in so many interesting ways, and just a rough one to approach. Yeah, this is honestly a perfect pick for number 2.
Yeah, and the thing is as sad as it is a love story. Like, that's the thing that's interesting about it is it's a romantic movie for Robin Williams. He's playing a romantic lead in a way. I mean, essentially at the heart of this movie, it's about how soulmates live through life and death. I mean, it's like Interstellar. Love goes through time and space, and done a lot better, sending that message a lot better than that movie. I like Interstellar, fine. Yeah. But it's it's such a just beautiful, sensitive, artistically well-made movie. Love it.
Well, Chris, do you want to share your pick for number 2 here?
I do. So what's funny is when you started talking about the 90s, I was like, oh shit, is he going to say my pick? And look, like you've kind of already alluded to, Robin Williams, it might astound people to learn that Robin Williams actually has a lot of roles on his CV. Like you mentioned, some of the stuff he does with Bobcat Goldthwait, stuff like that comes out in the, 10s and the mid 2000s, like great stuff, but not stuff that's going to move the needle. And I'll go as far as to say that this movie, I don't think moved the needle for anybody. You've already alluded and spoken about the other time that Robin Williams and this director worked together, but my pick is a film that nobody talks about for understandable reasons. 1992's passion project for the director, Barry Levinson's Toys. Absolutely adore that movie. I get it. It is not a good movie in a lot of ways. But at the same time, it's kind of perfect because Robin Williams, it was one of those, again, early times where they were trying to do the comedy and the serious at the same time. And I think it kind of is a little lopsided. I don't think it needs to be as serious as it is. And a lot of stuff just happens in the movie without any explanation. But it is a movie that's kind of beyond explanation, frankly. If I were to say it's a movie about, I would say it's a movie that's more or less a character study of the Willy Wonka of a toy company, effectively. And if that's not something you're into, I totally get it. Like you've already mentioned with your pick, this movie has a great supporting cast: Michael Gambon, Joan Cusack, Robin Wright, LL Cool J. I'm pretty sure this is Jamie Foxx's first movie as well. I normally don't like Robin Wright in a lot of things. She's amazing in this movie. And Joan Cusack is also amazing. And Michael Gambon plays Robin Williams' uncle, who has a adopted son played by LL Cool J, which is a bizarre sentence that has to be uttered. But again, this is an interesting movie, but it is definitely similar to your pick, a thing that is so its own thing. I could not in good conscience advise someone go and watch it as their first Robin Williams thing, because they would probably be like, why did you make me watch that movie again? Like, I don't know. It's a movie that I've done a podcast episode on the Culture Cast, and even then I kind of struggled to talk about it because it's such a strange movie in a way that passion projects tend to be. Like the upcoming, what is it called? Cosmopolis, the Coppola movie. It's like, it's a massive passion project. I'm like, it's going to be so fucking weird. Nobody's going to like it. And that's kind of how I felt about Toys. Like, I saw it like in the mid 90s and it made an impression on me, but nobody's talking about it. It doesn't even have it then became a cult classic thing on Wikipedia, which a lot of movies do have that. But that's my answer for toys. Now, I'm very curious. Either one of y'all have opinions about toys?
I don't really have an opinion. To be honest, I think I've seen it once, and
Right.
and I don't even really remember it that well to speak on it. So I'll let you know when I've seen it again, because I honestly, you talking about it makes me like, maybe I should just watch it again. It's been a while. So.
It's not a movie to see when you're a kid, because when you see it when you're a kid, like, it's fucking PG-13. Like, it's called Toys, but it is an adult movie. So, yeah, I don't know how or why I saw it, but it made an impression on me, and I can understand, like, if you saw it and it didn't, would not be something you'd come back to.
Yeah.
Toys is great and needs a lot more recognition. It
Thank
definitely is great. It's one that I in anyone else's filmography, this would be a standout performance, but because it's fucking Robin Williams, it's like number 18 on a list of just masterpieces, essentially. But when you take it and set it in like this weird pedestal that it deserves amongst the rest of his titles, you can recognize the genius here. There is so much on this that is just wild. And honestly, maybe one of the most iconic pieces of art from the poster from any of his movies. That poster is like, that was in every video store for a couple of years at least. Loved this movie. Been a long time. Solid pick.
What's yours, Ryan?
You both are living in the 90s, so I'm going to go with the depressing pick, and I think that everybody hearing that probably already knows what it's going to be if you've seen it. I'm going to have to go with the 2009 film called World's Greatest Dad, just like Chris just alluded to, directed by Bobcat Goldthwait. This is a movie about Junie Cortez from the Spy Kids killing himself and becoming a bit of a cult phenomenon at his high school, and the way that Robin Williams deals with it, being his dad. And obviously with the fact that he took himself out a few years after this movie sort of became like we don't want to talk about this movie, but it is a very like perfect black satirical movie that is done just magnificently. Also, I know it's Robin Williams and he's known for being crude and stand-up and all that. He didn't do that all that often in his films, especially in the later part of his career. And it's a very taboo-filled movie. And with everything that Bobcat Goldthwait is willing to discuss under the sun, which is literally anything, Robin Williams has this wide-open palette to just like paint as creatively as he wants to with this really heartfelt and depressing and like life-affirming script. And it's incredible. He because of the broken mess that he found himself being, especially around this time, because he was like going through yo-yo periods with his wife, and going back to rehab like 2 years before this, and being clean at the time but still struggling with mental health. All of that hurt shines in this movie in a role that you would think like maybe you should have passed that up, because this hits really close to home. But watching it, this movie is so easy to just find your semblance of humanity within it and somehow wear it like a warm blanket, because it works because of what you've seen Robin Williams in before that. And that's why I chose it for this, because everything that he did before that makes this movie actually work. If he didn't have the endearing 25-year career that he did right before this, it would just be some weird old dude playing the dad of a masturbating teenager. But instead, it's this heartfelt, depressive state of somebody that you felt like you've known for the last 30 years. And I love this movie.
Yeah, I think there's actors that as they get older, as they get into their careers, they start to become more and more self-aware of their legacy, and so sometimes I think they pick roles that sometimes reflect, some of what they've already done, and in a way trying to move on from it in a way. Like I think maybe Robin Williams was looking at what he had done and he's trying to figure out a way to keep it interesting, so he does something.
Yeah.
And Bobcat, like you said, he's going to always do. He's gonna go for very hard subject matters, and I'm sure for Robin Williams that's enticing, especially at this point in his career. So, as comedians, they want to talk about the things that people are uncomfortable want to talk about. So definitely, I think a perfect movie for like you said, for later in his career and kind of looking back and reflecting. Yeah, and it wouldn't have, like you said, wouldn't have worked with anybody else. So
yeah.
I think Bobcat Goldthwait should make an appearance on an episode of this show at some point. I mean, there's not a million movies, but there's enough, including the movie that it's alluded that women are being taken into the forest by Bigfoot to become forest brides, which is something only Bobcat would do. Like you alluded to, Steve. Like Bobcat is just, he is very much his own person, and I love him for that. There are very few people like that in the industry that are given as much sway and swing as Bobcat. But yeah, and then he gets to work with people like Robin Williams. So this is a movie I've never seen. It's been on my list forever. But I will say I'm a little disappointed that you didn't mention 2009's also film that Robin Williams was in, Old Dogs, a great film.
Well, the other one that was kind of my other kind of under radar kind of like I was 1 Hour Photo was kind of the other one.
Oh, okay.
That was the other one I thought about talking about, but What Dreams May Come just connected with me more. But 1 Hour Photo is just one of the roles he did that just fucking spine tingling, just whole other person in that movie. Yeah.
The movie that I struggled with putting as my second choice also came out in 2002, which I'm a huge fan of, Death to Smoochie, which is another weird, like 1 Hour Photo. That is a weird role for Robin Williams to have, but
that one's gotten the cult status.
It sure has, right? Me mentioning and going to bat for Death to Smoochie is not going to surprise anybody because it's a cult movie. It's just like 1 Hour Photo is in a lot of ways. Like, you know, nobody mentioned Bicentennial Man. There's some weird things that Robin Williams did that, like, I'm disappointed we didn't mention because there's a whole group of people that are a little older than, like, I don't know, like in their like 10 to 15-year-olds that only know him from Night at the Museum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is like, again, like Sean Levy, kind of a Chris Columbus adjacent style guy, and the kinds of stuff that he does, doing a thing with Robin Williams. That's like, again, I can only assume there's got to be a large group of people that love Robin Williams because of Night at the Museum, right?
Yeah, it's, I guess for somebody, like, I mean, like any actor, they're always trying to find a way to stay relevant at different points of their career. And he, I mean, Teddy Roosevelt, it works, right?
He looks like him. He really low-key does with a mustache, with the right style mustache. He really looks like him.
And then what's kind of weird is like, wasn't the third one like one of his last roles? Like,
it sure was.
It came out after he died.
Yeah. So like, it was kind of weird seeing him, that being kind of like one of the final things he did was like that kind of like 5 minutes of screen time, and that third Night at the Museum movie that everybody wanted. It's. Yeah, there's a lot of great. I mean, like one of the ones that we didn't mention at all, Birdcage, is another one that I think is just such a, a movie that is just still remembered and still loved by many. That I bring that thing out like once every year. So,
I think we should go to the next question because I think we can just start naming stuff in the next question at this point, good. Which is something we have not really done. But there's so many on this list. Is the problem.
So let's get into it then, Stephen. What do you think is Robin Williams' biggest impact on pop as a whole? And again, doesn't need to be like a certain title. It can be, I mean, with him, there's a lot of stuff that we could allude to. I mean, we've already talked about Vietnam. We've talked about World's Greatest Dad, and so many other things that he did, like, personally affected people. So, in your opinion, greatest impact on pop culture from Robin Williams?
To be honest, I think there's a couple things. One's more on the positive side. One you could almost say is for him. I'm sure he would even consider this kind of more on the negative side. But positively, I think his style as an actor in comedies greatly influenced some of the big filmmakers that made comedies in the 2000s up through now. Like, I would say specifically Judd Apatow, the loose, kind of almost off the cuff way he does his comedy in his movies, where it's a lot of like ad-libbing, I think is something that's very much influenced by what Robin Williams did, and other actors like Jim Carrey of the time would do. I think he very greatly influenced that style. I don't think that style always works. Sometimes I get a little sick of the rambling, and that works better as a stand up. It doesn't necessarily always work in a narrative film, but I think he definitely had an impact on comedy, in that way. But the other thing I was alluding to, and I think been something of conversation in recent times, is his impact on voice acting, being of course the breakout with the genie in Aladdin, kind of changed the industry, and I think it kind of changed it kind of for a negative. It caused this snowball effect of casting big actors to play animated voice characters, and taking jobs away from voice actors, people that do this for a living, that do all the hard work and do amazing voice acting, now gets taken away by Bradley Cooper, or Emma Stone, or whoever the big actor is.
Chris Pratt, I think, is the name you're looking for.
Chris Pratt, who's playing every animated character ever. He's now going to be Garfield. So it's. I think that you could say that one of the biggest impact his, character as the genie had was that it made studios really realize the impact of having a big name behind the voice of your characters, and how it can draw more people in, more adults into the theater as well to see the kid films. And I mean, it's unfortunately it's not the most positive thing he did to impact the film, but still an impact. I think it's still something we're dealing with today. So
preparing for this, I went back and watched some of his old interviews, which are some of the things I've always loved from him. His appearances on Late Night were amazing. And there was one, I think it was literally just from like the premiere of Robots. And I don't know if anybody remembers this, but somebody asked him, like, what is the voice that you went to play your character in Robots? And he literally just said, it's just me. I'm just an old guy who's falling apart. And hearing that, and the fact that he leaned on his own vulnerability to just be his normal voice for Robots, was like so telling on the fact that he actually cares about what he's doing for voice work, but also it's so depressing for his life. But yeah, totally agree with you. Chris Pratt should not be doing any more voice work.
He loves stomping Goombas. God. Well, I mean, look, I was one of those people. It's like, it's weird now that they've made a animated Mario movie and they have an actor who's been playing Mario for 30 fucking years. Like, get out of here, Charles Martinet. We don't need you. We got Chris Pratt. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I think that's interesting. That's not the direction that I would have gone, but I think that's an interesting thing to bring up because, we already brought up Tim Allen. I mean, What is Tim Allen known for a lot of people, if not one thing? Buzz Lightyear.
Around the same time, too.
Yeah, within a couple of years. So it's an interesting take. I did not go there myself either, but I think that is, it's an interesting byproduct of Robin Williams.
Well, for somebody that loves him so much, is his me to bring that up it kind of is weird, a weird kind of, depressing route to take it. But when I thought about it, I was like, yeah, of course there is no other Robin Williams. He's like, it's hard to compare him to anybody, but unfortunately one of the biggest impacts he had was with his voice.
Right.
And his voice as an animated character. And it just really had at that time, Disney was rebounding and was, getting bigger. And the next thing you know, Lion King comes out and you have one of the kids from Home Improvement on there, Jonathan Taylor Thomas, like the names would keep coming. You would keep getting Mel Gibson's in, in Pocahontas, it just keeps going, and today it's as bad as ever, it's set a precedent that I don't think Robin Williams intended to happen. So,
I mean, George Miller did essentially that with Happy Feet and cast Robin Williams. But everybody in that movie is known. I mean, the movie has Hugh Jackman and Nicole Kidman in it, and Robin Williams. So, yeah, that's a weird thing, but it is totally a thing that he really had a hand in that unintentionally. I've got to feel like
it's true. One more that I wanted to point out because it came out the same year. I love that we keep referring to Aladdin, but don't forget that first year he also did Fern Gully.
Right.
I forget about that. Yeah.
Which he never came back for, but he did come back for the direct-to-video version of Aladdin, which I always found to be very weird, but it was such a commitment from him to do it. Like, he ended up getting associated with that character so much that it's like, I have to be the one to do it. Like, at that point, it would be too obvious if someone else was doing it. Like Emo Phillips trying to do like a Robin Williams thing, or, it's like, because again, like Fern Gully recast that character immediately. People are going to skewer us for not mentioning Good Will Hunting.
We're not there yet, but yeah.
I guess so. I guess we're not there yet. Fair.
You and I are still going. Yeah,
that's fair. That's fair. That's fair. I mean, again,
it's not your fault. It's not your fault.
That's fair. I think for me, it's a weird thing when I think about Robin Williams because, like you've mentioned, the voice acting, he didn't do it a whole lot, but every time he did it, it was like a big deal.
Yeah.
The Aladdin of it all, if I remember right, I think he came back to play Genie in literally everything.
Yeah.
If I remember right, I don't think he allowed them to even reuse lines from his original takes. If I remember right, I think he came back like willingly because it was such an important character for him to record everything that he possibly could. So like video games, stuff that they did for Disney rides and where they alluded to the lines and all that. I believe he recorded all of that.
Take pride in your work.
And I mean, it's an iconic one. It's the one that made him truly famous.
Yeah.
When you really get down to it, like obviously he had been in some very important films and all that stuff, but it's Disney in the early 90s. Like it is his fame. Without Aladdin, a lot of this doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Period. Chris, you want to answer for number 3?
Yeah. So my answer, we've kind of already alluded to it a little bit, but I think this kind of ties into an episode we did a while ago on Jim Carrey. I think that Robin Williams is that original trendsetter in terms of showing that you, as a comedic actor, can lead a film and be the lead of a vehicle as a comedic actor. Because vehicle films, for the most part, are for big-name actors, action stars, dramatic actors. And comedic actors kind of tend to get forgotten because, again, comedy is looked down on because it's a genre, even though to write comedy is harder than making someone cry. I mean, to get a genuine laugh or a chuckle out of someone is very hard. And so when you have someone like Robin Williams showing that you can not only be a comedian and lead a film, but you can lead it and it be successful for the most part. I mean, look, Toys didn't make a lot of money, but it's not like Toys came out and nobody went and saw it.
Right.
People that went and saw it because Robin Williams was in it. So just like Mrs. Doubtfire, just like so many things, it's like he's in it, so it's worth watching. I don't even remember that Dead Poet Society comes out in the late 80s. I always think that that's like a late 90s movie for whatever reason. But that right there, I mean, again, he just has the range, and I think he shows, and you've already alluded to it also, Stephen, like a lot of our best actors have a comedic background. Robin Williams, I think, there will never be another actor comparable to Robin Williams, period. And the only one who comes close is kind of Jim Carrey in a lot of ways. And in a lot of ways, Jim Carrey more or less took the mantle from Robin Williams for a while, and then had his own thing.
He chased it, but unfortunately not.
I mean, Jim Carrey had a pretty good 90s, even compared to, like, he had like a stretch where it was like, this man is cranking out hits, but Robin Williams was the same thing. So I mean, to your point, maybe it's not passing as much as just competition, but Robin Williams did it first, which is why it's important. Because again, comedic actors being given a big role as the lead in a movie, not necessarily something the studios were backing up the Brinks truck full of money to do.
Yeah. Well, I think at the same time during the 90s, the boom of the kind of the 90s SNL scene also played in line with that, with Adam Sandler, of course, kind of coming into play. All the guys from that era, Dana McCarthy, Mike Myers, people like that were busting on the scene, and Robin Williams paved the way for them guys to become, film actors, break off of SNL and lead films. And as you can see, it hasn't stopped Adam Sandler since.
Or Will Ferrell.
Yeah, Will Ferrell. Yeah, I mean, it's continued. It's continued to be, he paved the way for a lot of guys to bring comedies back, and have them be, very successful. Now, of course, I think we've kind of gotten into a lull for a little while now with comedy. I don't think comedy's quite had. I don't think comedy has quite had the leading person right now. I think we're avoided that a little bit. I think we're looking for that next person. And all it, I think a lot of it has to do with what type of comedy is being asked for from the audience. I think for a while there in the 2000s into 2010s, we had, of course, like the Judd Apatow. That was the man-child, vulgar comedies that were leading the way. And I think we kind of veered off of that. And now I don't know where comedy is now. I don't know. And there is no person that's leading it. So, yeah, we're looking. Who's out there? I don't know who's out there. Who's out there, man?
John Mulaney?
Is he going to be the guy to lead? I don't know.
Well, and what's weird is I was going to say, I think the answer to your question is the people that are in comedies now are people that are not comedic actors. Because, I mean, I was talking before we recorded this about a recent movie that came out that has John Cena in it, not known for being a comedic actor, but the guy's funny as hell, frankly.
Yeah.
And I think now it's a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B. Having people that aren't perceived as funny is funny. And I mean, Tropic Thunder has Tom Cruise in his best role, and it's funny. I think it's maybe people getting into comedy now as opposed to people leaving the comedy sphere. Comedy is seen as more of a viable thing in a lot of ways because, like you said, it's everything.
Yeah, Arnold Schwarzenegger did that in the 90s as well. He broke out of action and joined the comedy realm and was successful a few times with it, and that's, maybe we're in that phase right now where we're waiting on the next person to pop up, and now it's just the guy, the ironic comedic actors are the ones taking over right now, with like your John Cena's, The Rock, people that, are funny because
Daniel Craig,
playing a detective, or what was the one, Logan Lucky?
Yeah, Logan Lucky.
Yeah, just playing weird, awkward characters, and the style that Robin Williams and people like Jim Carrey played are these kind of very character cartoonish types that I think people kind of grew, maybe tired of for a while, and maybe that's looking for a comeback. We're waiting for the right actor to pop back in and take that place, because everything's cyclical. People's taste seems to come back around, and they want something that they think is new, but has already had its place in history. So I don't know, Ryan. I mean, what do you think?
Well, I mean, after talking about comedy, I feel like an idiot talking about this, but I think probably the biggest impact, personally, that he's had on so many people is the ability to be vulnerable. There are so many people in his shoes that never would have allowed themselves to talk about it publicly, that never would have allowed, even in, I mentioned I watched some of those interviews. There are so many of those red carpet moments where he actively talks about how he was hooked on cocaine. Could you imagine anybody doing that at the premiere of Dune 2 this year? No.
Timothy Chalamet comes up, he's like, dude, I like dildos. I've just had dildos up my ass, and that's what, So
I thought you were going to say the popcorn bucket. I've just been fucking this popcorn bucket all day.
Something about his life from 2003 until his life ended. It was all about this open advocacy for everybody's mental health, including his own, sharing that he is a human and struggling himself, and being open about struggling with substances, struggling with the way that he feels about himself, and sharing that there's sadness behind those eyes. I can't even begin to fathom the number of lives that, again, like I mentioned, grew up with him and felt something about it, because there are so many of us that, I mean, I was born, and Stephen, you were born around the same time, where his first movies were taking off, but it wasn't, we weren't impacted until the early 90s. So we missed a couple of those first dramatic entries. And when you come in at the comedies and you're like, oh, I'm a kid, Aladdin's great. And you grow up with this guy just being in every movie that you love. And suddenly we get hit with like all of these, I hate to say it, but like historical events starting with 9/11 and all of these terrible things happening. And this person that we've idolized for the last 15 years is struggling. And now you see him discussing or portraying in some of your favorite movies somebody with a lot of pain that is vulnerable and allowing themselves to be a human. Like, when would Brad Pitt have ever done that? When would even some of these other actors that were potentially on very like similar paths, like we brought up Adam Sandler, when's the last time we heard about Adam Sandler's like human side? There's not much that we hear about him outside of the limelight. And Robin was always like, yeah, let's discuss the true reality of the fact that I'm facing a lot of demons. And then he takes his own life. And that, I hate to say it, but like the fact that it is such a tragic end to such a positive force for so many of us, it makes it inspiring to face the day every day and say, you know what? I'm not taking that way out, because if I'm doing it, I'm fighting for him. And it brings me so much joy that we can all go back and watch all these and still feel all this positivity. And even 2024, what is the biggest legacy we can talk about this year? His daughter is making an incredible comedic movie. And I loved the movie that she directed this year. It's incredible. And I'm stoked that what he left behind is a story that so many people around our age can go, fuck, yeah, this is hard. And sometimes I don't want to do this anymore, but unfortunately, I'm gonna win. I'm gonna face tomorrow and come out of it alive.
Yeah, I mean that the transparency of people in that business is tough to come by, and the fact that he was willing to share his troubles with the public, just it made what he did on screen seem even more real. It made, whatever he conveyed felt real, and that's something when you're growing up watching film and you're a kid and it becomes the center of your world. And I know all three of us, we love film, so it's been with us our whole lives essentially. And when you feel like your connection to it is actually genuine, and that there is, you're not just watching something that people are making money off of, but that it is something connective, that you're connecting to it and it's real. It's not artificial in any way. There's something there that really speaks to you, and that it's not a lie. And that's what I agree. That's a really good, more positive thing, impactful thing than what I had to say. But that his sincerity and his transparency was very impactful. Yeah, love that.
Any thoughts on that, Chris?
I mean, what's funny is you mentioned Robin Williams, and then I think of someone similar who was very open about their battles. That's Anthony Bourdain. I mean, he struggled similarly, did something very similar to Robin Williams in taking his own life. And I always think to myself, like, if that motherfucker who had all of that was struggling, and I'm sitting here struggling, like, holy shit. Like you said, it's kind of, for me, it's motivation to get up every day and not lose that fight to that person that just wants to stay in bed all day and do nothing. And look, Robin Williams had Lewy body syndrome, which is like, it can be misdiagnosed as Parkinson's. And I mean, we've heard the stories about what's going on with Bruce Willis, and that's what Robin Williams had to look forward to, like, which is not, I mean, for me, that's not a life worth living. Like, and I understand why he made the decision he did, because if that's your outlook on life, is that you are going to lose your mind because that is what this disease makes you do, I don't think I'd want to stick around either. Like, I could stick around through being, physically disabled in terms of like being in a wheelchair, or if my spine was broken, but man, the idea of like just losing your mind one day. Yeah, it's hard to see that with Robin Williams, because like you mentioned, Ryan, he never really talked about that because he didn't know that was going to be a thing he had to talk about. He talked about the stuff that made that worse, which was the cocaine use, which made him very paranoid and impotent, his words, not mine. But also, I mean, again, like, his struggles with substance abuse made everything that would end up later in his life so much worse because he did those things. But it's nice to see someone being open about it, because, yeah, it's hard to think that there are people out in the world suffering from similar things, but when someone like Robin Williams is suffering from it and is open about it, it's a pretty big deal.
Well said. Before we get to the last question, and we're obviously at the point of probably stepping away from Robin for a minute. Any last titles nobody has mentioned yet that you really want to give some love to that was also on your favorites lists?
Well, you did bring up briefly Dead Poet Society, of course. Oh, Captain, My Captain. So it's something that I say every once in a while. Like when you're really just advocating for somebody, and you're like, like that moment, of course, in the film is amazing. Let's see. Oh man, this is tough. I don't want to say them all either.
There are a couple I would say to not check out that are bad examples of the good things that he can do.
There's a film he did. This one I watched a lot, and it's not, I wouldn't say it's necessarily a great film, but it is one I watched a lot growing up, Father's Day, with him and Billy Crystal.
Yeah.
One scene in that I always used to, I still kind of bring it up today. It's the scene where the film is about these two men who are trying to, there's this woman they were both with, and they don't know who's the father of the kid. So they're like competing to figure out which, they're trying to figure out whose kid it is. And they start looking at his hair, and Billy Crystal's like, he's got my hair. He's like, no, you got curls. I have whirls. See, that's a whirl, and I still do that today. Like that, for some reason, that stands out in the movie. But like, it's a fun, you have these two icons of comedy in the same movie together. Billy Crystal, Robin Williams. It's pretty fun. So that's one that definitely was one I watched a lot. Yeah, go ahead, guys. You Insomnia. His role in Insomnia is another great small role. Love that.
2002 was a big year for him.
Yeah.
1 Hour Photo, Death to Smoochie, and Insomnia back to back to back. That's wild.
Yeah. Dark year.
Dark year. I'll be the first one to mention the name Terry Gilliam. Obviously doing The Fisher King is a big deal. The Adventures of Baron Munchausen. Got to go all the way back to Popeye in 1980. Obviously, that's a big one. Robert Altman, but one that a lot of people kind of hate. So I get not loving it. But The World According to Garp after that is pretty damn good. The other ones, again, we didn't give enough love to Hook. I know I mentioned a lot at the beginning, but one of my favorites. And then we did mention Death to Smoochie. The other one that has kind of come back and like cult classic, really people are finally loving it, The Birdcage. The Birdcage is such a damn good movie and obviously important for lots and lots of reasons. This is one that during that time, actors really didn't act in the kind of role that he's acting. And it wasn't something that you're like, I'm going to jump into this and be in an openly gay movie and be like pro homosexuality, but he was always just a positive, supportive person, and so many of his movies are great. I will say the last one that I think sort of meant a lot to me, other than, of course, I mentioned World's Greatest Dad. I, for some reason at the time that it came out, loved the movie License to Wed, even though it's really bad. Mandy Moore and John Krasinski, and the poster with Robin Williams laying on the bed between them was really awkward, but at the same time, I was embroiled in religion right then, and I was 20 years old, so it was like the you have to get married now type of time of my life. And guess what happened soon after that? Anyways, yeah, it's a not great movie, but yeah, certainly meant a lot to me at the time.
Well, two that I'll bring, I meant to say these and I forgot, but like Jack, I did kind of mention before, that's a Francis Ford Coppola film, and that's just odd about,
Yeah, it is odd. That's the word I would use.
Yeah, the other one is right around the same time. Patch Adams was a big one.
You just you're taking it all the way before I got to it. No, it's you beat me to it because it's also weird. Like those are weird Robin Williams roles that make very little sense why he's cast in those roles. It's strange to me.
But it's there's something about, once again, the movie cannot work, but with him in it, it makes it watchable. And I watched them movies a lot growing up. So I'll leave it there. I'll leave you some. I'll leave you some crumbs.
I don't think there's anything left because I already mentioned Old Dogs, which I unironically enjoy because it's just a stupid movie. But John Travolta and Robin Williams together is, again, like, shockingly charming in their like old age versions of themselves. We've kind of already alluded to Flubber being a thing that is, it's fun. It's got Christopher McDonald hamming it up as just another villain in a long line of villains that he plays, rich asshole villain. I'm not surprised anybody didn't bring up Bicentennial Man, which is kind of like, for me, Jack, Bicentennial Man, and Patch Adams are like weird things, just weird, bizarre things that Robin Williams has done that I'm just like, okay, sure, like makes sense, I guess. I don't think we really have anything else, at least for me, to cover. Maybe Man of the Year, but that's an Ivan Reitman movie with Robin Williams in it. It's weird. Again,
you don't want to talk about RV for the next 6 minutes?
Jeez Louise.
Well, the only other one that I was looking through his filmography, the only other one I could bring up is Awakenings, as a Penny Marshall film. Mm-hmm. He plays a doctor again, in that, and a lot more straightforward drama role for him in that, but he's really good in it. I mean, it's not my favorite film. I like Penny Marshall, but I know people like that movie, but it's a little bit on the dry side for me. Robert De Niro is also in it, good performances, but yeah, that's another kind of standout for some people.
I think that one was written by the guy that directed Searching for Bobby Fischer, Steven Zalian.
Yep.
Good guy.
And you mentioned Monty Python a little bit already with Terry Gilliam, but absolutely anything's kind of a fun movie. I mean, I'm a Simon Pegg guy myself, so Robin Williams playing, isn't he the one he plays a dog, right? He plays like a dog in that movie, I think. It's very, very weird, and that's, I think, his last role, or it comes out after he passed away. Similar to Night at the Museum 3, a movie I forgot actually existed.
Yep.
I've seen the first two, but I've never seen the third one.
Well, that leads us to what I think is going to be the most difficult question tonight.
Yeah.
Question number 4 is going to be, what is a cinematic bridge to Robin Williams? Something that if somebody's already a fan of whatever subject you answer, they might be clued in that they would like Robin Williams.
Yeah, this is tough, and I really, like I said earlier, it's Robin Williams there is nobody else like him. There's not been anybody else like him. I mean, he's a one of a kind. We've already kind of said his name, Jim Carrey, around the same time. To me, if you like Robin Williams, Jim Carrey gives you a variation of what he can do. He's somebody that has some range as a dramatic actor. Just doesn't quite have the relatability factor for me. I don't look at Jim Carrey doesn't have that everyman quality that I think Robin Williams could bring. So it's tough, man. I mean, like, he's not quite as talented, especially comedically. Paul Rudd can sometimes, he can do comedy, but he's got that everyman quality. But he just isn't he ain't that funny. He doesn't have that much range, but it's tough, man. Please open my mind, because I had a really hard time with this. Like, I could not really find anything that could be like, hey, he's just like Rob White. No, please enlighten me.
Well, I'll throw my answer out there first, because I struggled with this for the longest time, because I wanted to just say, if you like stand-up comedians that are open about having depression, which is most of them, you'd like Robin Williams. However, the question is, what is a cinematic bridge? So it completely ruined that. And so My answer is, in the last, 8 to 10 years, and it's obviously, this isn't a novel concept, but it's getting leaned on a lot in the last decade. There is this glut of films that have come out with stand-up comedians or people that have only ever done comedy suddenly turning heel and doing some random super dark role. And if you are always somebody that seeks those out because you're like, what, Patton Oswalt is playing a killer? Let's watch that. Or you watched some random, like when Jim Gaffigan played a serial killer recently a couple of years ago. Like, if those are the type of things that you're like, these are interesting because I know that they struggle with mental health, and somebody that comes in as a normally funny person turning a complete 180 and doing it, it really gives you that feeling of his career. And that's the only thing I could really think to tie to this.
Yeah. There you go. There's a thematic through line there that works. I mean, I was trying to think of direct, like, just people that were unrelated to to maybe an aspect of other than I was trying to look for somebody that had the same, maybe similar comedic chops or similar profile. And it's tough. He's so singular. Yeah. Chris, please. What do you got?
I got Will Ferrell.
Uh-huh.
And Adam Sandler. And like Adam Sandler more now than he used to be is probably a better comparison.
Yeah.
He's just, I mean, look, Adam Sandler is a different kind of stand-up comedian, like, and that translates into his film performances because, I don't know, Adam Sandler always plays such big characters. There's very little relatability. And like Will Ferrell hits on it from time to time, but I'll make the joke here that I've made plenty of times. After Anchorman, Will Ferrell just kind of always played the same character, which is like elevated Ron Burgundy, if not that just being Will Ferrell's like elevated version. Like think of like Semi-Pro and what's the other one? There's like a glut of these movies that
Blades of Glory.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Like like that kind of stuff is just like, again, like that's what Robin Williams tried to avoid for the most part, was doing samey stuff. And last night when we were recording, you mentioned Stranger Than Fiction, Ryan. Like that's a good example of Will Ferrell being kind of in a serious role for the most part.
I love that movie.
It's a great movie. And, you know, that's the kind of movie that Robin Williams totally could have been in too, because again, like dramatic and comedy. But yeah, I think that the actors that I mentioned are funny, less funny than Robin Williams. Again, I don't really resonate with Adam Sandler's stand-up. Like it's very happy doopy dabby. Like I don't, that's not my thing. Like, yeah, it's like, okay, like that never resonated with me. So Robin Williams, like the fast way that he talks and kind of the observational humor, that for me is what resonated with me. So yeah, I would think that there isn't really anybody. Like they're close. But like you said, he's such a singular talent. It's kind of hard to be like, well, it's that one guy. There's like, nah, not really. It's like with Michael Jordan, like it took a while for someone who was as good as Michael Jordan to really come into the basketball sphere. Same with someone like a Tom Brady. Even like it took 20 years almost to have someone who's as good as this person to show up. And with Robin Williams, I'm not saying we're waiting for that person because the way we consume media now is so different than the heyday of someone like a Robin Williams, but there is not anybody who I will go out of my way to say they are a Robin Williams comparison. It's tough.
That's true.
I mean, that's the issue we've never run into with this show on these episodes, which is how do you compare someone like this to anyone else? And that's very hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a good call.
I think that's why he stands out so much in all of our lives is there was nobody else like him. He didn't get lost in the shuffle of all them other comedians that were in that time, your Adam Sandler's, he just stood out. He was just always pushing himself. He was always, creating characters in films where the characters were not necessarily the highlights. You know, like he made them real. You know, he made, he brought some. He's so physical. You know, that's something we don't say a lot either. Is like. He's funny. He says a lot of things. He's really off the cuff, but he's also very physical. He moves a lot. He moves his hands. He's jumping up and down. He's doing a lot of things that makes his characters unforgettable. You know, and so, yeah. I mean, maybe somebody that's a very physical comedic actor, you know, is somebody that could be a good comparison. But once again, it's like nobody that he has so many facets. It's hard to find the right fit. So.
He definitely filled the space in all of those roles. He, something about the way that he moved, it was not that like somebody else in the film with him was not giving enough, but it was, if you're going to give me space, I'm going to take it. I'm going to be somebody that will embrace it and make sure that the room feels full with just the two of us in this scene. Yeah. And he ran with that. So, well
and
said.
I think that, you know, like you were talking about Hook, I think that's why him and Spielberg together was like, even though the movie doesn't work for me that much, him in the movie drives that movie, like you said. Like it's Spielberg he's a sentimental filmmaker, and Robin Williams is a sentimental actor. Like he's a sensitive actor, and so I think that their pairing, I wish they had done more, you know, together. But who would see him in Minority Report? You know, like Robin Williams in Minority Report, it would have been weird. Or him in Munich wouldn't have worked.
I was about to say Munich. Well,
Actually, Chris is over there thinking about it. He's like, yeah, shit. Yeah.
which role do I cast?
I'm trying to think. Like, actually, what's funny, I think to name a role that Robin Williams would have probably elevated the source material a lot. And we've already mentioned a movie that it's related to in terms of, I guess, the original story being written by Chris von Allsburg. Imagine if in Polar Express it was Robin Williams. That movie would work a lot better than Tom Hanks. And I think that maybe Tom Hanks is the best comparison to Robin Williams. Because I think a lot of people forget how funny Tom Hanks is. He's one of my favorite comedies of all time is Dragnet, which he's in, and he's very funny. And I think maybe Robin Williams and Tom Hanks are the best comparatives, because Tom Hanks leans further in one direction than Robin Williams did, but I think they're both on the same dial, just leaning in slightly different directions. Because Robin Williams would have been a really great dramatic actor. If he really wanted to be, he could have been like, I'm done with comedy. I want to do the dramatic thing. But I think the draw of comedy was always too much for him. It was like anything else. He wanted to make people laugh, which I get that.
Yeah, I think we got that with this got us to the right actor. I think Tom Hanks is probably the closest we're going to get, in almost a contrast way, but it almost is perfect. It almost works.
And how, if we did an episode of Tom Hanks, would we compare anybody to Tom Hanks? Like, that's the problem that we would run into there, which is what we're running into here. Like, he's a seminal actor, Robin Williams is, and there will never be anyone else really like him. Yeah, it's a shame, because again, like, the world would be a much more interesting place if Robin Williams is 73 kicking it. But, things happen. People get sick, unfortunately. I would say the same thing about Michael J. Fox. Like, what would the 90s and 2000s have been like if Michael J. Fox was able to make movies? Or if Chris Reeves had been able to make movies? Like, Jesus Christ, for fuck's sake.
Yeah.
I would have loved more Death Trap movies.
Well, I think one, if you're listening to these episodes for ideas or inspiration to watch, or if you listen to this and you're like, damn, Robin Williams, so many great titles, go watch one or two that don't get talked about enough. Go watch some of his stand-up. Go watch something that inspired people from the late 80s that we don't talk about enough anymore. This is one of those topics that you could dive into for the next month and change your life. This is the type of filmography that can inspire you to write your own damn film. And I hope that this show can provide a foundation for something like that for anybody out there. But on that note, to inspire somebody to go watch your show, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, Stephen. What are your two interviews that you've done that you're most proud of? That if somebody's going to go to listen to of your back catalog right now, what are the two that you steer them to?
Damn, man, you are putting me on the spot. Oh man, jeez, give me just a second so I can not make the wrong decision in my mind. Get my list out here.
While Stephen is looking at that, I'll highlight one thing that I didn't say earlier is that I owe a lot to Stephen, because Stephen and I worked together for the 2022's Shelf Shock Rewind Awards. He and I are the one that sort of birthed the idea together. We were both pursuing the idea of an award show at the same time, and Stephen was awesome enough to reach out to me and say, hey, I know that you have eyes on a lot of these things. What would you think of this? And we both were like, yeah, we should do this together. And it has morphed into something giant. And so publicly and privately, all mixed in one, I want to say thank you so much again, because man, the last 2 years has been insane. And obviously seeing it grow from one show to the next was a huge leap. And I'm just glad that you're still a part of it.
No, of course, man. I'm glad it was our way to connecting, and we knew each other's shows and things, but when we developed that together, that's when we really became friends. And so I wasn't as involved this year. I was still doing stuff behind the scenes, but I'm still going to always, as much as involved as I can be in that and other things. We'll do some other things. We did this. And we got some. I'm sure you keep adding more things to your list of things to do. So whenever you're gonna develop your Netflix series, just let me know. I'll be a writer on it or something.
Chris and I are already stoking the fires on other ideas.
I know. I'm sure you are. You get more people. I know you're getting more people involved, and it's just going to keep growing. And I love seeing it, man. I love seeing it. I'm just glad to be a very small part of it in some way. But if I had to pick a couple, I would say one of the big highlights was definitely getting Eddie Muller on from TMC. He's just an icon, and me and Andrew are just both big film noir nuts, and getting the guy that hosts the show about film noir and knows the most about, put books out about film noir. I mean, that was just a proud moment to be able to just get that guy on. I mean, it was just amazing. And seeing him without a suit. I mean, unfortunately at the time we were not doing video, and the thing is, he would have dressed up if we were doing video. So you wouldn't have been able to see what I saw, which was Eddie Muller in just normal clothes. So I've seen something you guys haven't seen, but probably other than that, God, we've had so many really fun interviews and really interesting people from all different walks of life, not just people that are in the industry. And that's the easy place to go. Like, we talked to Sean Baker, we talked to, damn, man, why did you do this to me? One of my favorite other interviews is Tony Stella, artist extraordinaire who has seemed to get more popular all the time. And he wouldn't allow us to have him on video per se. He's a very private person, but we did get video, and I put like an image in front of his face. But we did see him when we conversed, and he's just such a fascinating dude, and the dude's life is so fascinating. And he's such a big film buff, and just has such a investment in what he does and how his process is. I love that interview. He's just so smart and just such a artist. He's such an artist at heart. So I'm jealous of his upbringing. I'm jealous of his story, So, Eddie Muller, Tony Stella, two of my favorite interviews.
The Tony Stella one was on my short list.
Was it?
For sure.
Okay, good.
Well, again, thank you for doing this. I hope that you enjoyed it, and clearly we're going to have more of these in the future, because I know that you got some other ideas that are cooking for some other topics. But to everybody out there listening, we hope you check out the next episode and that you continue to push your boundaries of interest in film. And in the meantime, give us a rating on iTunes, wherever you're listening to this. Go check out weirdingwaymedia.com for all of the incredible podcasts that Chris is related to. Go check out the disconnected.com for everybody on the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network. But most of all, subscribe to Chasing Labels, and have fun watching movies this week.